What are we gonna do when we get back?
What are we gonna do when we get back?
I take a shower and hit the rack.
Take a shower and hit the rack.
Welcome to Charlie Mike. If you're a combat veteran with an entrepreneurial bug and want to know what highly successful combat veteranpreneurs are doing to transform their sacrifice and experience to create their visual reality, then this is dedicated to your inspiring and fulfilling future. And now your host, Dwayne Perrell.
No way, gotta run, feet, lots of fun.
Invest in Yourself ebook is my free gift to you for listening to the show and becoming part of the CO Nation. To receive your free gift, please go to landmarklifecoaching.com. Thank you for joining us on this episode. There are so many veterans with the core strengths to become successful entrepreneurs and continue to make a huge positive impact on our country. Here we highlight the amazing successes of combat veteranpreneurs. Combat veterans, for the purposes of this show, are soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen who have served in the United States in wars, campaigns, and in theater on foreign soil or hostile waters. Our guest today is Michael Penney. Mike is a Marine combat veteran of Ramadi, Iraq, Kajaki and Sangin Afghanistan. He served with the 3-7 Weapons Company, deploying twice to Ramadi, Iraq in 2005/2006 and again in 2007. Reenlisting during his second tour, Mike transferred to Quantico to become an instructor. He is certified as a combat marksmanship coach, trainer, and instructor trainer. He's a formal school instructor, school-trained designated marksman, and foreign weapons instructor. In 2010, Mike deployed on a third combat tour, this time with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, leading a section of advisors through Kajaki and Sangin Afghanistan. Having served in 2 wars and 8 years of service as an infantryman and weapons instructor, Michael left the Marine Corps as a sergeant. All right, Mike, welcome to the show, and thank you for being a guest.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. That's fantastic. Jesus.
Yeah.
Listen to that.
hey, it's your history,
Wow.
right? Very impressive. So
it makes me tired and it makes my shoulders ache from where the pack straps were, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see, it's funny when you hear your own bio being read on something, you're like, wow, I really did all that. That's impressive.
The heck is that guy?
Yeah, exactly. I remember about half of it, but that's still good. So, yeah, so I gave a lot of overview of your amazing military experience, Mike. So one thing I really like to stress with our listeners on the show is, there's that period between, who you were in the military and what you decide to do when you get out of the military, and whether that, for the sake of this show, everybody is an entrepreneur, but you don't always transition into that role right away. So I was curious, can you tell our listeners, you decided you were getting out, and kind of how that went for you, and what your thought processes were?
Sure, yeah. Before I deployed on the third tour that I went on to Kajaki and Sangin, I kind of shopped around because I didn't know if I wanted to leave the Marine Corps. I knew that I wanted to get out of the Marines, but I didn't really understand, where I was going to go next. And I looked at the other branches and decided that I was going to EAS and entirely leave military service prior to deploying. And then I got a bunch of books that I was going to read on deployment, which I did read. I also picked up other literature like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is that Dale Carnegie. And there were a couple of other books that I was already reading that were around inventing products and bringing them to market, because that was my first interest. I wanted to create a useful, value-adding piece of gear in coming out of the military, and that was my first product that I designed when I was overseas. And one of my law enforcement professionals, a guy that I was working with, he himself being an Air Force veteran, law enforcement, and then as a contractor coming overseas. So he had been out in the civilian world for a while. and he gave me Think and Grow Rich, which was fantastic. And so I just started connecting the dots. In what little spare time I had on deployment, I would sit down and dream up product. I already had an idea. I knew what I wanted to create, and it popped out of my head, and I drew it down. And by the time I came home, I had a provisional patent, and the first company was up. So when I got home, I already had an idea for a company, at least for a product, on what I could potentially offer, knowing that it was going to fulfill a huge problem that we have in the military. So anyway, it's a magazine insert for cleanliness and storage was my first product. It's basically like a polymer magazine.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it was that progression. It was like, okay, I want to be an inventor, and I want to create something that's going to be useful for the military, and maybe that would lead towards entrepreneurship, but I wasn't really sure if I wanted to be an entrepreneur yet.
Yeah, that's some great points there. In fact, the whole self-study aspect, right? Before you take that leap and just say, you know what, I'm going to do it. There's so many classics like you bring up, the Dale Carnegie series, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Well, like for example, Napoleon Hill's was written in the 1920s or 1930s. I can't remember exactly when. All those principles are amazingly still relevant today, and it almost makes the guy another absolute genius of his time, because what the principles he laid out are still so relevant. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs kind of overlook or kind of disregard that whole self-study aspect, that I'll just learn it as I go, and that's true to a lot of extent. There's a lot of business aspects you do, but being a lifelong learner and being willing to pick that stuff up and learn it in your spare time, and then take the time to really think through a product like you did and say, I know there's an absolute need and I know there's an absolute market for this, so it's just a matter of learning some of the ropes of the industry and being willing to jump out and take that chance and move forward with it. So those are some really, really good points for our listeners to hear.
Right on, yeah. Well, and it's interesting also because I'd like to make the point too, and just kind of like drive it home, that the more self-study that you do, the more you're going to realize that there are dots that you're connecting in between the different pieces of literature, and really what you're realizing are there are the basics that are inside of each one of those pieces of text. So it takes a lot of reading and going through and studying and analyzing and so on and so forth, but you'll realize that there are basics when you drill down deep inside of each one of those pieces of literature. And so if you could grab those basics and hang on to them, then just start queuing into them, that it's the same thing that we learned in the military. And then now in coming out, it's understanding the basics in entrepreneurship, in business leadership, and then just applying those. So, but yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, that's a great point. Everybody thinks that, most of the concepts that you're going to learn or that you need to know are so deep. And in fact, a lot of it is somewhat levels of common sense once you kind of, like you said, connect the dots. But when they're these dots that are just kind of sitting out there separately, you don't really get it, and so that's what makes it look so complex. But once you start realizing how intertwined those concepts are, and once you like you said, you start with the basics and just keep building on that, because that's what you're going to do with a business anyway. You're not going to go full blown 100%. You've got the exact right product out of the gate. You're going to refine that product or that service over time, and so being able to know your growth path with that product or service is very important.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, and it's funny because that first product, albeit a great product and something that I got to see go from graph paper all the way to somebody's hand and being tested on 6 different continents. Someday I'm going to get somebody to Antarctica, but ultimately the company itself failed, and it boiled down to the business management. I of course take my portion of that, but it was one of those things where as I was going through this entrepreneurial journey, I understood that I definitely did not know anything business-wise coming out of the military. I did not understand business-wise what the terminology was. One of my favorite things to ask entrepreneurs nowadays is, tell me the contribution margin on your given product. Or tell me the contribution margin on your given billable hour for your service. You need to know all of the information inside of your company if you can tell me the contribution margin of your product.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know the variable costs. If you can tell me the contribution margin ratio, then you know the fixed costs as well, and then of course the revenue intake, so on and so forth. But with the first product, I was learning all of that. I was understanding what pro forma meant, and just creating assumptions and where to pinpoint assumptions. And then I wound up going through the Institute of Veterans and Military Families Entrepreneurship Boot Camp for Veterans, which is for post 9/11 service disabled veterans. And it was great. It was a fantastic education experience. It was 45 days correspondence course. It was 9 days in classroom at that time. I'm pretty sure that the program is updated so far. But it was a lot of information, and it was all worthwhile. And I gained a lot of close friendships. My business partner, Bennett Tanton, who is a co-founder of Cigars and Sea Stories with me, we met there. And when I first came into the course, I had said, hey, unfortunately, my company has fallen apart. I don't know. I don't know. What do you want me to do as far as going through the course? And they're like, just go through. Just do it. As if nothing's going on. Pitch your company at the end, which call it a pitch competition. I mean, it's for bragging rights, so to speak, but it's judging your pitch capabilities and whether or not you have a viable product and what have you. So with this failed company at the end of EBV, I went through the pitch competition and took most outstanding venture with an already failed company. So it was like, sweet.
Yeah, if I could sell that, I can sell anything.
Right, it was great. So it's like, oh, all right. And everybody kept giving me, I heard this time and time again, I do not want to invest in your product or your company. I do want to invest in you. Like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I've already got the GI Bill, but whatever. How do we work on this? So I gained a lot of mentors coming out of that, and it gave me confidence to go and pitch in front of a lot of other business owners, a lot of other businessmen, a lot of other mentors, wealthy individuals, to see whether or not they wanted to invest. But it was one of those things where it was like, no. Only because of the arrangement that it was and so on, right? Mm-hmm. And it was one of those times. Now, keep in mind that I had left the Marine Corps May 12th of 2012. May 16th of 2012 was my first day in class. So I went from Camp Pendleton, California, near San Diego, all the way to Boston, Massachusetts, and was sitting in my first college course 4 days after leaving the Marine Corps. Applied to one job, got one job, worked as a sales associate at Best Buy. A couple of months into working as a sales associate, was offered a few different positions, leadership-wise, was doing other things entrepreneurially, and left. It was like, okay, Best Buy has faith in me that they would offer me these leadership positions, so I know enough to be dangerous in that environment. Not saying that it's a huge, test of my mettle, but at least I knew that they saw the leadership capabilities that I had. And so then I wound up leaving Boston, moving down to Raleigh, North Carolina, starting Cigars and Sea Stories, which we have about 200 episodes up right now. And then taking the experiences that I gained along the way, and took Cigars and Sea Stories, built it into a podcast that it is now, which is fantastic. We have hundreds of thousands of people who listen to us. It's great. It's just one of those things where it's overwhelming sometimes. It's cool getting the phone calls and the emails and the texts and all of that other stuff. But then also, as I was going down this path, I approached Dean Bunchu over at Bunker Labs. And that's kind of where the journey takes another turn, so to speak. I had gone through this IVMF portion. Well, I wanted a follow-up. When I was done with IVMF, I basically felt like I was, and this wasn't their fault, it just felt like I had transitioned back out of the military again. I had gone through this great program where, and this is what I told them in feedback. I said, look, I came here a Marine, but I'm leaving a veteran, because it really allowed me to understand that there were other veterans in a new walk of life. It was more like I needed to find entrepreneurs who, oh, by the way, happen to be veterans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah.
In Bunker Labs. So anyway, when I graduated Most Outstanding Venture, but then the company had already failed, I was basically like, what do I do? And then I went to the EBV National Conference and said, how do I add value here? How do I add value there? How can I add value to your overall organization? And who could I potentially work with? And that's when Bennett and I reconvened. That's when a couple of other, the cast of characters started coming back through my life. And I realized, okay, I could do, and this is what I've always wanted to do, is create essentially a advisory group where we're taking our experiences out of the military and providing those experiences to civilians. Not necessarily providing them experiences, but they always ask you, right? They're like, can you come in and talk on the subject of leadership and maybe resiliency and some of these other things? And I'm like, yeah, that's great. I could totally come in and do all of those things. How about I come in and show you literally our templates, our planning and execution methodologies, all of these other things that we would otherwise consider to be boring. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And how about I show you how we actually got that job done? And so that's what I wound up doing. That was the catalyst for why I wound up going to the governor's working group and linking up with Dean Bunchu and the folks over at Bunker Labs.
Yeah, that's an important point. It's really, very important as an entrepreneur, as, like you said, the mentors and the networking, that is really critical to your success. One example I give is, I've gone up through the ranks all the way from a, entry level IT person to currently as an executive in the IT space. And I almost literally could do that within an organization without networking outside of the organization and still be successful. But as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to identify these sources like the IVMF and the EBV boot camp and things like that. And then, of course, Bunker Labs, which is doing amazing things across the entire country now for veteran entrepreneurs, and, be able to get in there and mesh with those that have a very, very similar, if not identical background from their military experience, and find ways to create some really amazing businesses. And I'm sure Bunker Labs has a laundry list of organizations where their founders came through their program, for example. And so, like you said, you hooked up with Bennett, and then you guys created Cigars and Sea Stories, which obviously is doing extremely well, from a podcast, perspective. It's kind of the dream level of audience, most podcasters hope to get to, and most don't. And so, yeah, those are some really, really good points that you make, Mike. So,
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah.
go for it.
No, we're going to go ahead and take a really quick commercial break here. And we come back, we're going to get more into some advice that Mike has for those looking that are transitioning out or have already transitioned out of the military and are looking to become successful entrepreneurs as well. You can see Mike has really already gone down that path and is on basically the serial entrepreneurs list now with all the different ventures he's been not only starting himself, but I'm sure through his affiliation with Bunker Labs, he's played, a significant part in many others' success as well. So we'll go ahead and take a quick commercial break. Landmark Life Coaching's vision is to be the nation's premier coaching partner for inspiring and empowering those in transition. They partner with courageous groundbreakers and transitioning veterans to create fulfilling and empowering futures that they desire. They have partnered with various entrepreneurs and transitioning veterans to leverage their core strengths and implement the framework for the future they always dreamed of. Could you or anyone you know benefit from a success partner to bring clarity to your future or their future? If so, please check out landmarklifecoaching.com for more information and charliemikepodcast.com for the Charlie Mike Podcast, showcasing the successes of combat veteranpreneurs. Okay, we are back with Mike Penney. Mike has been giving us an amazing overview of not only his military career, but also the ventures that he has started and been, he's had one that, he coins as a failure, but it's, maybe failed in the business life perspective, but from lessons learned and the impact that it had on his future ventures in a positive way is a success within itself. And so, before we went to break, Mike had been talking about, some of the networking programs that he had been through, some of the mentors he's had, and how much that has really been an important aspect to being successful. So, Mike, now that we're back, what's some like really key advice that you like to pass on to veteran entrepreneurs that are, kind of sitting on that fence, right? They're like, I really want to do this. I think I've got a good idea, but, they just don't want to take that first step.
Oh, sure, absolutely. In my world, it all boils down to market research. Market research is the number one thing that I would go out and learn how to do and master and figure all of that stuff out first. A lot of people ask, can I come into Bunker Labs? Well, then I digress a little bit here. I came into Bunker Labs saying, hey, I've created this thing called a 5-paragraph business plan. And it's basically the military's operations order. And then what I did is I took a lot of the business terminology that I learned out of the Institute of Veterans and Military Families, and I inserted that within, but I expounded on it through all of those case studies, essentially, all of the lessons learned. So I came to Bunker Labs and I said, hey, I want, what I've addressed through my own market research so far, and this was, oh goodness, this is over 2 years ago. I said, I've already looked at what is going on out in the environment, and because the models that we've got are interpreting chaos, we're all talking about big data and all of these other things. I said, look, we're losing ourselves to basically paralysis by analysis. There needs to be some sort of action, but it's got to be intelligence gathering, put it together, create a plan, go out, provide that action, come back, what did you learn, compile it all together, topic, discussion, recommendation, what are some of the lessons learned? For me, that's how you patrol. I've been on thousands of patrols. That's the easiest way to put it, just thousands of them. I've probably, I was estimating it one day because I needed to sit down and figure out how many op orders I've written in combat. And I estimated roughly between around 1,200 and 1,500 operations, which is just a ridiculous amount of operations. You know what I mean? Like 5-paragraph orders. And what we would do is we had a Thal's manual, which is a right in the rein style manual, and we would sit down and write on that with pencil, and then you could easily erase it in between different op orders, or you would write it in a notebook or do whatever. I mean, however you could do it in order to get the information out of your head down into a clear, concise plan. pull everybody together, orient them to the battlefield, and then deliver that operations order in a clear, concise brief to the individuals who trusted their lives with your plan so that you can go outside the wire and do harm against the enemy. It's that simple. So why can't we apply that to business? How is that not a sales meeting? How is that not a, you can literally apply it to every aspect of business. So in market research, because that's the number one thing, I went into Bunker Labs and I said, look, we need to make sense out of all of this chaos. And really what it boils down to is how do we herd the cats that are working out there in remote locations getting the job done? And I'm like, dude, we've been using the operations order to work in, small units, lead those small units of men and women who are ranging between 18 and 25 years old. And how do we do that? How do we successfully go downrange and fight wars? And so a lot of folks, like when I went into Bunker Labs and I said, hey, this is what I want to do, I wound up going through their Epic program, which at the time was 12 weeks. It's now 10 here in this location, but it varies, which is the education package that is offered. So as I'm doing that, as I go and do the 5-paragraph business plan in Bunker Labs, in the middle of the cohort, I get accepted to TED Talk. I get accepted to do TEDx Raleigh. So I'm juggling these two things in between going through the cohort and doing, like I'm doing both. It's not one or the other. I'm doing both. I'm crazy. And I practice every single day. I practice my TED Talk for a minimum of 4 hours, minimum, every day. A 15-minute talk for 4 hours every single day, and every other which way, forward and backward, and refine it, and a stack of papers for the entire process. And I would put people on the phone with me, and I would do it, and I would do it in front of my wife, my kids, and anybody and everybody. And it changed about a bazillion times until it was finally there and it was perfectly refined. And I rehearsed it literally until the second I took the TED Talk stage, and then stepped into the red dot, did it, nailed it, boom, walked off the stage. And then like the next day I went back to work. Kind of a deal. Yeah.
I was going to say, I've actually listened to that TED Talk, and it is phenomenal. So now I know what your secret sauce was from behind pulling it off, because it's absolutely flawless and engaging, and and the passion that you have in it is almost chilling, because you take us there in certain situations when you're giving the talk, and the experience that you were experiencing at the time. And I applaud you. It is very good.
Thank you. Well, it was one of those things where I get imposter syndrome only regarding, in my opinion, my most important audience, which are fellow veterans. And I have to go one step further and say fellow Marines, especially the guys that I served with, because my biggest, not fear, I would say worry, the biggest thing that I'm cognizant of as I travel forward, let's say, for instance, is do not give a black eye to our organization. Don't do that to our Corps. And I was really worried that other guys would be like, dude, that's so freaking cheesy. Loser. Why are you doing this? Why? Don't do that. How you worry about somebody, you get that anxiety for the person that's on stage. My wife is that person. My wife does not, and I love speaking in front of audiences. I've been doing it professionally for a long time. And in Quantico, there is a hellacious process to become a combat marksmanship instructor, to be able to go and train lieutenants, where you've got 300 lieutenants in auditorium-style seating in a big, huge classroom with LEDs in the back and a jumbotron, and you have to be locked and cocked and know your stuff, and it's awesome to be able to get to that level, but you can't say pet words and stuff like good to go, good to go, good to go, good to go. And you're just like, oh, I'm gonna knife hand you so hard. So, good to go? Yeah, you're that guy. So, That was the other thing, is I was coming out of an instructor background into TED Talk, and the number one thing that they said is do not give a period of instruction. Do not give a class. Whatever you do, this is a talk in order to encourage somebody along this journey. And the second is you can't move outside of that red dot. Like what? Taking away all my tricks. Right up the, you know what I mean? It was one of those things where it was like they're really up the game, because I'm a dynamic guy. Move around a classroom. You're gonna pay attention when I talk. I guarantee it. And I say it like that because I've got something to say. I've got clear and concise points. I've got lessons learned. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. This sucked. Here's how you can mitigate failure. Go forth and be merry. And I couldn't move. So that was one of those things, if you notice in the beginning, which you don't realize it. So they announce you out on stage. And what I did is I took that little clicker from Bill, our MC, and I buttoned my jacket. And I did a mental thing where when I button my jacket, I'm not allowed outside of that red dot.
Very good.
And then I went through and did it. And when I was done, I wanted to leave the stage or whatever. And I don't think they got it on camera. They had it on the rough cut. I stopped at the edge of the red circle and undid my jacket and then walked off the red circle.
Very good, yeah.
And that was like my discipline device. Mm-hmm. Which also, I was carrying my gun too. So no big one. Yeah. Little concealed carry action. I'm a North Carolina concealed carry handgun instructor. Say something.
Yeah, that's right. That's
so
right. Very good. Yeah, yep. That's funny.
Carrying a concealed 9mm on the TED Talk stage, priceless.
That's right. Probably the only one to date, or at least the only one who's said they had it. That's funny. Yeah, so that's some great information, though. Having that discipline that you've developed in the military and being able to mentally turn it into something as important as, sustaining your composure, being within the box that maybe, a certain industry or a certain way of doing business has put you in there is really good information for people to know, because there's so many times where if you could just do this, or if you could just do that, the business, would be easier, or the business would, grow quicker potentially, or something like that, where, just kind of expanding on those limitations, but having the mental wherewithal, like you created for yourself in that situation, is very important. So that is a really good example. So this has been, an amazing conversation, Mike. And as we're running out of time, I'd like to give you an opportunity to let our listeners know how they can get in contact with you or learn more about your business.
Sure. So I've already told you about Cigars and Sea Stories. It's fantastic. Enjoy. You can follow us on social media at Cigars and Sea and all of those other good things. But specifically for the folks who are listening today, I'd like you to check out 5paragraph.com. That's 5paragraph.com. We have 15 tutorial episodes that are all free. There's an orientation episode on there. You can download the 5-paragraph business plan template. We update that pretty regularly, about once a quarter, based upon your feedback. You can contact us and schedule a call with one of our advisors. It's minimum 15 minutes. Call might go longer than that. You're going to get a free workbook out of it on the back end in order to get you started. We're setting up a forum right now, and we are working on a bit of software, which I can kind of sort of hint at right now, which is pretty cool. But there are tips, tricks, tutorial episodes, all sorts of good stuff at 5paragraph.com. A guidebook is about to release, and pretty soon here I'm going to be declaring independence against mediocrity, and I challenge each and every one of you to pick up 5-paragraph business plan and choose your own adventure in life. So it's based on our operations order. I did not write the book for military veterans. I wrote the book so that we could take our knowledge and bring it to a civilian audience.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show, and most importantly, thank you for your service to our country.
Hey, my privilege, dude. I got to learn how to shoot a rocket launcher when I was, like 18, so I really enjoyed it. Really, it's one of those things.
Remember, loyal listeners, we are the home of the free because of the brave.
Thank you for tuning in to Charlie Mike Podcast with Dwayne Perro. Our objective is to bring successful veteranpreneurs to help inspire and provide insight into what helped them become successful, with the hopes you can take away various strategies you can implement in your entrepreneurial journey. Visit us on iTunes, leave us a rating and review, and let us know what you thought of the show. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Hoorah!